Marcus Thompson had seen his share of unusual clients in 15 years of private security work, but Ambassador Zalera of the Kytherian Empire managed to make his office feel small simply by existing in it. She sat across from his desk with the kind of perfect posture that suggested either excellent breeding or a spine made of reinforced titanium, her pointed ears the only obvious indication that she wasn't entirely human. Those ears, elegant and swept back like something from ancient mythology, twitched occasionally as she spoke, giving away emotions that her diplomatic training kept hidden from her face. "Mr. Thompson," she said in accented English that somehow made every word sound like a formal decree, "I require your services for a matter of considerable delicacy." Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying not to feel intimidated by someone who probably weighed less than his equipment bag but radiated authority like a small, well-dressed nuclear reactor. "I specialize in personal protection, Ambassador." "What kind of delicacy are we talking about?" "My daughter Nissa is participating in a cultural exchange program on Earth. She is brilliant, curious, and possessed of what your people might call an adventurous spirit." The way Zalera said, adventurous spirit, suggested it was a diplomatic euphemism for something significantly more problematic. "And you're concerned about her safety?" Zalera's laugh was like crystal breaking, beautiful and slightly dangerous. "Mr. Thompson, I am concerned about your planet's safety. My daughter has inherited certain family traits that make her interactions with new environments somewhat unpredictable." Marcus pulled up his standard protection contract on his tablet, already mentally calculating hazard pay rates. "What kind of unpredictable are we talking about? Political sensitivity? Cultural misunderstandings?" Yesterday, she attempted to improve the efficiency of her dormitory's heating system by introducing trace amounts of Kytherian atmospheric processors into the ventilation. The building now maintains perfect climate control and the air has never been cleaner, but the plants in the lobby have achieved consciousness and started composing poetry. Marcus paused in his typing. "I'm sorry, did you say the plants are writing poetry?" "Quite good poetry, actually. Very nature-focused, as you might expect, though their rhyme schemes need work." Zalera reached into her briefcase and produced a tablet that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. "The university administration has been remarkably understanding, but I fear Nissa's next attempt at helpfulness might be less architecturally contained. Ambassador, with respect, this sounds like a job for a hazmat team, not a bodyguard." Zalera's ears twitched with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Mr. Thompson, my people have a saying, the greatest dangers come not from our enemies, but from our children trying to be helpful. Nissa doesn't need protection from others, others need protection from her well-intentioned enthusiasm." Marcus looked at his contract template, then at the ambassador's earnest expression, then back at his template. "So you want me to babysit an alien college student who accidentally terraforms things? I want you to keep her safe while preventing her from inadvertently declaring war on humanity through acts of misguided kindness. The pay is commensurate with the difficulty of the assignment." She slid a payment authorization across his desk, and Marcus's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. The number had enough digits to fund a small space program. "That's very commensurate," he admitted. "Kytherian protective chemistry is quite complex," Zalera explained casually, as if discussing the weather rather than biochemical warfare. "When we feel threatened or stressed, our bodies produce compounds that can be motivational to those around us. Nissa is still learning to control this response, particularly in unfamiliar social situations." "Motivational how?" "Human fight-or-flight responses become significantly more enthusiastic. There was an incident at a campus coffee shop last week. 3 students declared their undying love to baristas, 2 professors challenged each other to academic duels, and a campus security guard attempted to arrest a vending machine for loitering." Marcus stared at her. "Your daughter can accidentally dose people with emotion-altering chemicals?" "Only when she's excited or nervous, which, given her personality, is approximately 70% of her waking hours. The university has been very understanding, but I suspect their patience has limits." "And you think I can handle this because?" Zalera's expression grew thoughtful. You have an unusual psychological profile, Mr. Thompson. Your military records indicate exceptional stress tolerance and an ability to remain functional in chaotic situations. Your civilian work shows a pattern of protecting clients who are, shall we say, challenging personality types. But most importantly, she paused, studying him with eyes that seemed to catalog everything from his posture to his breathing patterns. Most importantly, she continued, you find absurd situations amusing rather than threatening. This is a rare trait among humans, and an essential one for anyone who spends extended time around my daughter. Marcus considered this. His last client had been a tech billionaire who insisted on testing his personal jetpack in crowded areas while wearing a cape. Before that, a celebrity chef who'd received death threats from molecular gastronomists who disapproved of his traditional methods. Protecting people who created their own problems through sheer force of personality was apparently his specialty. What exactly does this job entail on a day-to-day basis? Accompany her to classes, social events, and any cultural activities she wishes to explore. Ensure she doesn't accidentally optimize any critical infrastructure. Mediate between her and any humans whose biochemistry proves incompatible with her presence. And perhaps most importantly, help her understand which human customs are genuinely important versus which ones exist merely for tradition. That last part sounds like anthropology, not security. Zalera's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Thompson, my daughter once spent 3 hours trying to understand why humans shake hands instead of sharing biochemical data through direct skin contact. She concluded that your greeting customs were inefficient and attempted to improve them by developing a more information-rich alternative. I'm afraid to ask what happened. The Dean of Students now knows more about Kytherian reproductive cycles than anyone outside our species, and Nissa has been politely asked to limit her social innovations to non-contact activities. Marcus looked at the payment authorization again, then at Ambassador Zalera's expectant expression. Somewhere in the back of his mind, his practical side was screaming about liability insurance and workers' compensation claims. But his practical side had never been as strong as his curiosity, and this was definitely the most interesting job offer he'd received. When do I start? Immediately. Nissa is currently at the university library, attempting to understand human dating customs through what she calls field research. I received a call 20 minutes ago suggesting that her research methods may need guidance. Marcus stood and reached for his equipment bag. What kind of guidance? Apparently, she's been conducting surveys about human mate selection preferences, but her questions have been somewhat direct. The library staff reported that she's inadvertently created a speed dating event in the reference section. Of course she has, Marcus muttered, checking his gear. Ambassador, is there anything else I should know about your daughter before I meet her? Zalera's expression grew fond and slightly worried. She means well, Mr. Thompson. Everything she does comes from a genuine desire to understand and help. Her heart is in the right place, even when her biochemistry isn't. And if I can't handle the assignment? The ambassador's smile turned predatory. Then I'll find someone who can. But Mr. Thompson, I have a feeling you and my daughter will get along quite well. After all, you both seem to specialize in making the impossible merely improbable. Marcus found Nissa exactly where her mother had predicted, in the center of what could only be described as organized chaos masquerading as academic research. The university library's reference section had been transformed into an impromptu social laboratory, with students clustered around tables comparing notes on questionnaires while a young woman with distinctively pointed ears moved between groups with the focused intensity of a scientist observing a particularly fascinating experiment. Excuse me, Marcus said, approaching the apparent ringleader, would you be Nissa? She turned toward him, and Marcus immediately understood why Ambassador Zalera had been concerned about biochemical compatibility. Nissa radiated an almost visible energy that made the air around her seem to shimmer with potential. Her ears were even more elegantly pointed than her mother's, and her eyes held a curiosity so intense it was practically luminous. You must be my assigned protector, she said in English that carried just a hint of her mother's formal accent. Mother mentioned she was hiring someone to monitor my cultural integration process. Are you here to participate in my research or to observe my methodologies? I'm here to make sure your research doesn't accidentally cause an international incident, Marcus replied, glancing around at the impromptu speed dating event she'd apparently organized through sheer force of personality. What exactly are you studying? Nissa's expression brightened with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found an audience for her favorite subject. Human pair bonding rituals. Your species has developed the most fascinating approach to mate selection. Instead of sharing biochemical compatibility data, you rely on verbal communication and behavioral observation. I wanted to understand how you determine genetic fitness through conversation alone. And you decided to test this by creating an optimal research environment where humans could demonstrate their natural selection behaviors without the artificial constraints of your normal social structures. She gestured proudly at the organized chaos around them. I've collected preliminary data on approximately 47 different approaches to courtship initiation. Marcus watched a shy engineering student successfully ask out a graduate student in comparative literature while two philosophy majors debated the metaphysical implications of attraction nearby. Nissa, did you dose these people with anything? Her ears drooped slightly. I may have been experiencing elevated stress levels when I first arrived. Mother explained that my biochemistry can have motivational effects on human nervous systems. So everyone in this section is operating under the influence of alien pheromones? The effect is temporary and entirely benign. Nissa said quickly. They're simply experiencing enhanced confidence and reduced social anxiety. Think of it as liquid courage, but in gaseous form and produced by my endocrine system. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. How temporary are we talking? The metabolic half-life in human systems is approximately 4 hours, though the confidence boost often persists longer as a psychological aftereffect. She consulted a tablet that looked like it had been grown from the same organic technology as her mother's. Several subjects have reported that my research session helped them overcome long-standing social difficulties. That's actually kind of sweet, Marcus admitted, watching a previously isolated student animatedly discussing his research with a group of new friends. But you can't just go around accidentally drugging people, even if the results are positive. Nissa's ears perked up with interest. Is this a legal restriction or a cultural taboo? Because I've been having difficulty understanding the distinction between human laws and human customs. It's both. Also a matter of basic consent. Marcus pulled out his phone to check for missed calls from university administration. People need to agree to biochemical alteration before it happens. Fascinating. So human autonomy extends to your own neurochemistry. My people consider atmospheric mood enhancement a form of hospitality, like providing comfortable temperatures or pleasant scents. Different species, different rules, Marcus said, then noticed that several of the research subjects were beginning to look confused as Nissa's influence wore off. We should probably get you out of here before people start wondering why they've been participating in an impromptu sociology experiment. Nissa began gathering her research materials with practiced efficiency. Where would you suggest we go? I had planned to observe human recreational activities next. Something called bar culture that appears central to your social bonding rituals. Marcus imagined Nissa's curiosity-driven biochemistry interacting with alcohol and crowds of college students. How about we start with something lower key? Coffee shop, maybe? Excellent choice. I've been wanting to understand the role of caffeine in human social interactions. My preliminary observations suggest that your species uses stimulant consumption as both a ritualistic bonding activity and a productivity enhancement system. They left the library, Nissa chattering excitedly about her cultural theories while Marcus tried to calculate how much property damage a well-intentioned alien anthropologist could cause in a single afternoon. The answer, he suspected, was more than his insurance would cover. The coffee shop Nissa selected was a small, artisanal place near campus that prided itself on carefully sourced beans and minimalist decor. It was also, Marcus noted with growing apprehension, packed with the kind of serious coffee enthusiasts who had strong opinions about brewing methods and origin regions. "I've observed this establishment several times," Nissa explained as they joined the line. "The baristas demonstrate exceptional skill in their craft, but I believe their techniques could be optimized for improved flavor extraction and nutritional enhancement." "Nissa," Marcus said carefully, "what kind of optimization are you thinking about?" Her eyes lit up with scientific enthusiasm. "Cytherian biochemistry includes natural compounds that enhance flavor perception and promote beneficial gut bacteria. I could improve the coffee's health benefits while making it taste better. It would be a gift to these dedicated artisans." "Absolutely not," Marcus said quickly. "No biochemical coffee enhancement. No optimization. No gifts. We're here to observe and learn, not to improve anyone's business model." Nissa's ears drooped with disappointment, but she nodded reluctantly. "Cultural learning process noted. Humans prefer their consumables unmodified by alien biochemistry. But may I at least analyze their techniques? Pure observation, no intervention. Observation is fine. Just, try to keep your excitement levels down, okay? We don't want another confidence-boosting incident." They reached the counter, where a heavily tattooed barista with the intense focus of a true craftsman was operating an espresso machine that looked like it belonged in a laboratory. Nissa watched his technique with the rapt attention of a student observing a master class. "Double shot cortado," Marcus ordered, then glanced at Nissa. "What would you like?" "I would like to understand the molecular basis of this flavor extraction process," Nissa said to the barista with complete sincerity. "Your technique suggests years of training in pressure dynamics and temperature control. Do you adjust your grinding consistency based on atmospheric humidity?" The barista paused, clearly unused to customers who discussed coffee preparation in terms of molecular chemistry. Yeah, actually." "How did you know that?" "Particle size distribution affects extraction efficiency, and hygroscopic materials respond to environmental moisture content. I hypothesize that your intuitive adjustments represent an unconscious optimization algorithm developed through experiential learning." Marcus watched in fascination as the barista's expression shifted from confusion to genuine interest. "You know, I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's exactly what I do." "Are you studying food science or something?" "Cultural anthropology with a focus on human optimization behaviors," Nissa replied happily. "I'm researching how your species improves complex processes through iterative experimentation." "That's actually really cool." "Hey, want to see the new grinding setup we just installed? It's got micro-adjustment capabilities that let us dial in the extraction really precisely." Marcus settled in at a nearby table, watching Nissa receive an impromptu lesson in advanced coffee preparation while trying to determine if this counted as successful cultural integration or the prelude to another incident. Her genuine enthusiasm was infectious, and her questions were insightful enough that other customers began joining the conversation. Within 20 minutes, the coffee shop had transformed into an informal seminar on the intersection of food science and craft beverage preparation, with Nissa serving as both student and inadvertent teacher. Her biochemistry remained under control, but her natural charisma was proving almost as influential as her pheromones. "She's quite something, isn't she?" said a voice behind Marcus. He turned to see an elderly professor with the kind of wild hair that suggested either genius or a recent electrical accident. "She's definitely unique," Marcus agreed carefully. "Students like that are why I still teach after 40 years, the professor continued. "Pure intellectual curiosity, no agenda except understanding. We need more of that in academic settings." Marcus was about to agree when his phone buzzed with an emergency alert from the university administration. The text was brief but urgent: "Situation in the botanical gardens. Your client may be involved. Please respond immediately." "Nissa," Marcus called, interrupting her discussion of extraction pressures with what appeared to be half the coffee shop's regular customers. "We need to go. Now." She looked up from a sketch she'd been making of optimal grinding techniques, her expression shifting to concern. Is there a problem with my research methodology? Different problem, Marcus said, showing her the text. Something about the botanical gardens. Nissa's ears drooped guiltily. Oh. That might be related to my morning walk. Marcus had just finished explaining to the botanical gardens director why the orchid greenhouse now maintained perfect growing conditions without external climate control when Ambassador Zalera materialized in his peripheral vision like a diplomatic storm front. She moved with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested either excellent news or impending catastrophe, and given the past week's events, Marcus was betting on catastrophe. Mother! Nissa exclaimed with genuine delight, bouncing up from where she'd been taking notes on the spontaneously optimized plant habitats. You didn't mention you were visiting. Are you here to observe my cultural integration progress? I am here, Zalera said with the kind of measured calm that preceded either policy announcements or executions, because I received 17 separate incident reports in the past week. 17, Nissa. Marcus winced. When put that way, their track record did sound somewhat alarming. But they were all positive outcomes. Nissa protested, gesturing enthusiastically at the thriving greenhouse around them. The library's reference section has never been more socially productive, that coffee shop is now a model of artisanal excellence, and the botanical gardens are achieving unprecedented growth rates. The dean of students called me personally, Zalera continued, seemingly immune to her daughter's enthusiasm. Apparently, you've been conducting what he termed unauthorized optimization experiments throughout the campus. I prefer the term spontaneous efficiency improvements, Nissa said defensively. Zalera's ears twitched with what Marcus was learning to recognize as maternal exasperation mixed with grudging pride. She turned her attention to him with the focused intensity of someone conducting a formal evaluation. Mr. Thompson, walk with me. It wasn't a request. Marcus glanced at Nissa, who had returned to her plant observations with a selective deftness that suggested she knew exactly what kind of conversation was about to happen, then followed the ambassador along the garden's winding paths. Your first week protecting my daughter has been eventful, Zalera observed, pausing to examine a flower that was definitely not supposed to be that shade of iridescent blue. She's enthusiastic, Marcus replied diplomatically. Very curious about human culture. Yes, I've noticed her enthusiasm. I've also noticed several other things. Zalera stopped walking and turned to face him directly. You've managed to prevent any genuinely catastrophic incidents while allowing her to pursue her research interests. You've learned to anticipate her biochemical responses and manage crowd exposure accordingly. Most importantly, you don't seem to find her overwhelming. Marcus considered this. She's definitely intense, but she means well. And honestly, the results of her experiments have been mostly positive. That coffee shop is probably going to win awards for their new preparation methods. Zalera resumed walking, but Marcus could feel her attention like a physical weight. Tell me, Mr. Thompson, what do you think of my daughter? The question carried enough diplomatic subtext to fuel a small war. Marcus chose his words carefully. She's brilliant, compassionate, and genuinely interested in understanding rather than judging. She's also completely without guile, which is refreshing in someone with her capabilities. And personally? As a woman, not as a client. Marcus felt the conversational ground shifting beneath his feet. Ambassador, I'm not sure that's appropriate. You eat meals together. You've developed private jokes. Yesterday, I'm told, she convinced you to participate in what she called human recreational bonding activities at something called a bowling alley. Zalera's tone suggested she had access to intelligence reports that covered far more than official incidents. We went bowling, yes. She wanted to understand competitive leisure activities. She was terrible at it and found the whole experience hilarious. And you enjoyed yourself. It wasn't a question. Marcus found himself wondering if Kytherian diplomatic training included advanced interrogation techniques or if Ambassador Zalera was just naturally gifted at extracting information. She's good company, he admitted. Easy to talk to, once you get used to the occasional biochemical enhancement of local wildlife. Mr. Thompson, I have a proposition for you. They had reached a secluded section of the gardens where the alien-optimized plants created a natural amphitheater of unusual beauty. Zalera settled onto a bench that had somehow been carved from living wood, her posture shifting from diplomatic formality to something that might have been maternal scheming. In Kytherian culture, when a young woman demonstrates successful integration with a new environment and forms a compatible partnership with a protective individual, certain social expectations develop. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garden's perfect climate control. Ambassador, what exactly are you suggesting? I am suggesting that you and Nissa have demonstrated remarkable biochemical and psychological compatibility. Her stress responses decrease in your presence, your protective instincts activate appropriately when she's threatened, and you both exhibit what our sociologists would classify as optimal pair bonding behaviors. We've been working together for a week. Kytherian courtship evaluation periods typically last 3 to 5 days, Zalera replied calmly. We are efficiency-oriented in our social structures. Marcus stared at her, trying to process the implications. Are you asking me to marry your daughter? I am observing that you have already begun the process and suggesting we formalize the arrangement. Nissa clearly finds you compatible. She's been introducing optimization improvements to your living space, sharing biochemical data through proximity exposure, and engaging in what her cultural reports describe as extended recreational bonding sessions. Those were work dinners and bowling. Kytherian pair bonding rituals involve shared meals and collaborative recreational activities. The specific nature of the recreation is less important than the willingness to engage in novel experiences together. Marcus sat down heavily on the nearest bench, trying to organize his thoughts. Ambassador, even if I were interested, and I'm not saying I am, this is insane. We're different species. I don't even know if we're biologically compatible. Kytherian human hybrid offspring are not only possible but tend to exhibit enhanced capabilities from both genetic lines, Zalera said matter-of-factly. I can provide you with the relevant medical literature if you're concerned about practical considerations. That's not, Marcus stopped, realizing he was arguing with someone who had apparently already researched the genetics of theoretical grandchildren. Does Nissa know about this conversation? Nissa has been conducting her own compatibility assessments. Her recent cultural research projects have included detailed observation of your behavioral patterns, stress responses, and social adaptability. She finds you intriguing. As if summoned by their conversation, Nissa appeared through the garden paths with her arms full of plant samples and her expression bright with scientific enthusiasm. Mother, Mr. Thompson, you must see what I've discovered about symbiotic growth patterns in Earth flora. The biochemical exchanges are far more complex than I initially theorized. She settled onto the grass between their benches, spreading out her samples with the careful precision of someone documenting a significant discovery. Marcus watched her work, noting the unconscious grace of her movements and the way her excitement made the air around them seem to shimmer with possibility. Nissa, Zalera said casually, what do you think of Mr. Thompson's suitability as a long-term cultural integration partner? Nissa looked up from her samples, her ears twitching with sudden attention. His psychological resilience is exceptional, his adaptability quotient is well above human average, and his sense of humor remains functional even under biochemical stress. Why do you ask? Just curious about your professional assessment. Professionally, I would classify him as an optimal liaison for extended interspecies cultural exchange programs. Nissa's gaze shifted between her mother and Marcus with growing suspicion. Mother, what exactly are you planning? Zalera's smile was sharp enough to negotiate peace treaties. Nothing at all, dear. I'm simply exploring possibilities for expanded cultural cooperation. Marcus discovered that negotiating a marriage contract with an interstellar diplomat was considerably more complex than his previous experience with prenuptials had prepared him for. Ambassador Zalera had arrived at his apartment with a briefcase full of legal documents, cultural compatibility assessments, and what appeared to be architectural plans for multiplanetary residential arrangements. Clause 47 addresses the proper protocols for raising hypothetical offspring who may inherit Kytherian biochemical abilities, Zalera explained, spreading holographic documents across his dining table while Nissa examined his kitchen with the focused attention of someone conducting a thorough optimization analysis. We must consider educational requirements for children who can accidentally alter atmospheric compositions. Hypothetical offspring. Marcus repeated, watching Nissa apparently improve his refrigerator's efficiency by touching various components and humming softly. Shouldn't we discuss whether I'm actually agreeing to this arrangement before we plan the children's education? The compatibility assessments indicate a 93% probability of successful long-term pair bonding, Zalera replied with the confidence of someone who had apparently reduced romance to statistical analysis. Nissa's biochemical responses to your presence suggest optimal reproductive partnership potential. Mother, Nissa called from the kitchen, his food preservation systems are remarkably primitive, but I believe I can improve the nutritional retention rates through selective atmospheric modification. Marcus, do you object to your vegetables lasting longer and tasting better? Go ahead, Marcus said automatically, then caught himself. Wait. Should I be concerned about what selective atmospheric modification means? She's essentially creating a more efficient preservation environment, Zalera explained. Similar to what she did to the botanical gardens, but focused on maintaining optimal storage conditions for perishable goods. Marcus watched through his kitchen doorway as Nissa's casual contact with his appliances produced subtle improvements in everything from temperature regulation to energy efficiency. Is this what Kytherian courtship normally looks like? Optimizing your potential partner's living space. Territory preparation is a fundamental aspect of pair bonding behavior, Zalera confirmed. Nissa's improvements to your environment indicate serious romantic interest. The fact that you're allowing these modifications suggests reciprocal attachment formation. I'm letting her improve my refrigerator because it means my food won't spoil as quickly, Marcus protested. Yes, practical acceptance of optimization benefits. Very promising indicator of long-term compatibility. Nissa emerged from the kitchen looking pleased with her work. Your dwelling's environmental systems are now operating at considerably higher efficiency. I've also taken the liberty of adjusting your air filtration to remove common allergens and introducing trace compounds that should improve your sleep quality. You've been biochemically redecorating my apartment? I prefer the term habitat enhancement, Nissa said, settling onto his couch with the easy familiarity of someone who had already mentally rearranged his living space for optimal functionality. Mother, are you really trying to negotiate a marriage contract without consulting the involved parties? I am facilitating what appears to be a naturally occurring social bonding process, Zalera replied with diplomatic precision. Your behavioral patterns indicate mutual compatibility and growing emotional attachment. I am simply providing appropriate cultural framework for these developments. Marcus looked between the two alien women who had somehow taken over his apartment and apparently his entire future. What if I said no? Zalera's expression suggested this possibility had not been seriously considered. Why would you refuse an arrangement that provides genetic diversity, cultural enrichment, and access to advanced Kytherian technology for your offspring? Maybe because I like to make my own decisions about major life changes. But you are making your own decision, Nissa pointed out reasonably. You've chosen to accept my environmental modifications, you enjoy our shared meals and recreational activities, and your stress indicators decrease when we're together. You've essentially been courting me for 2 weeks. Marcus paused, considering this from their perspective. He had been looking forward to Nissa's company. He did find her environmental improvements genuinely helpful, and he couldn't deny that her presence had made even routine activities more interesting. This is insane, he muttered, but without much conviction. His phone's emergency alert tone interrupted his identity crisis. The message was brief and urgent, code red security situation. Client Nissa may be in immediate danger. Unknown hostile forces approaching campus. Respond immediately. The change in both women was instantaneous and dramatic. Zalera's diplomatic composure transformed into something that resembled a military commander assessing battlefield conditions, while Nissa's casual friendliness sharpened into focused alertness that made the air around her actually crackle with biochemical readiness. What kind of hostile forces? Zalera demanded, suddenly radiating an authority that made Marcus understand how she'd achieved ambassadorial rank. Marcus was already moving toward his equipment case. The alert doesn't specify, but campus security doesn't use code red unless there's genuine threat of violence. Kytherian political dissidents, Nissa said grimly. They've been opposed to cultural exchange programs. Mother, they may have tracked me here. Then we need to move, Marcus said, checking his sidearm and communications equipment. My apartment is defensible, but if they know her location, staying here makes us sitting targets. What happened next confirmed every compatibility assessment Zalera had conducted. Marcus and Nissa moved together with unconscious coordination, her biochemical enhancement of his reflexes combining with his tactical training to create a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts. When the first assault team breached his security perimeter, they discovered that protecting Nissa wasn't just his job anymore, it had become his instinct. The confrontation was brief but decisive. Nissa's defensive biochemistry created a zone of enhanced reaction time and heightened awareness that allowed Marcus to anticipate attacks before they fully developed, while his protective positioning kept her safe long enough for her natural abilities to neutralize the threat through what could only be described as aggressive sedation. Well, Zalera observed as the unconscious attackers were secured by arriving security forces, that was remarkably effective teamwork. Marcus looked at Nissa, who was checking him for injuries with the focused concern of someone whose biochemistry was still running in protective overdrive, and realized that somewhere between preventing her from accidentally terraforming the campus and learning to appreciate alien-optimized coffee, he'd stopped thinking of her as a client and started thinking of her as someone he couldn't imagine losing. About that marriage contract, he said to Ambassador Zalera. Her smile was sharp enough to cut through diplomatic immunity. I thought you might reconsider. Shall we discuss the residential arrangements? I have some lovely properties in mind that would accommodate both human and Kytherian environmental preferences. Can we negotiate hazard pay for any future children who inherit her optimization abilities? Marcus asked, watching Nissa unconsciously improve his apartment's security systems through casual contact with the electronic locks. Naturally. We must also include provisions for proper training in human social customs before they attend Earth schools. Nissa looked up from her examination of his security improvements, her ears perked with curiosity. Are you two planning our hypothetical offspring's education without asking if I actually want to marry Marcus? Marcus and Zalera looked at her, then at each other, then back at her. Do you want to marry me? Marcus asked. Nissa's smile was bright enough to power his newly optimized lighting system. I thought you'd never ask. Though technically, I believe Mother asked for both of us. Standard Kytherian efficiency protocols, Zalera said with satisfaction. Why waste time with prolonged courtship rituals when compatibility has already been established? Marcus sat down heavily on his biochemically enhanced couch, trying to process the fact that he'd apparently gotten engaged during a home invasion. This is definitely not how I imagined my life going. But do you object to the direction it's taken? Nissa asked, settling beside him with the kind of casual intimacy that suggested she'd already mentally rearranged their shared future for optimal compatibility. Marcus looked around his optimized apartment, at the unconscious political dissidents being removed by security forces, at Ambassador Zalera organizing marriage contracts like military campaigns, and at Nissa, whose presence had somehow made his entire world more interesting, more efficient, and considerably more dangerous. No, he said finally. I don't object. But I want it on record that this is the weirdest engagement story in human history. I'll make sure it's properly documented for the Cultural Exchange Archives, Zalera promised. Now, about those residential arrangements.